Alright, here with Nori, first place champion, first Argent Saga tournament. So what deck did you end up playing?
I ended up playing Ergon Fizzy, and which ended up being probably the best deck to play in that tournament at the time. Yeah, so you want to just get to the deck tech?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can start it off real quick. So it starts off very simple, a golem package. So the numbers might seem a little weird, but I'll talk them out. So we played 2 Golem of Jealousy, 3 Golem of Devourment, 3 Golem of Avarice, 3 Golem of Allurement, and 1 Golem of Vengeance. So the numbers are a little weird, but they ended up making the most sense for the tournament, where we were expecting heavy aggro, which is why we mainboarded the Devourment and also 3 Allurements, as opposed to any other number. We respected the fact that Raging Shard Beast is going to change the game, so we wanted to have answers for it just in case. As such, we had to make some concessions to like fiddling with the numbers. So we put 2 Golem of Jealousies, so that way we still had a 2-drop to play to enable our Dust Strikes early, and card advantage for a Strike of the Golems, which we'll get to later. But 3 of that one may not be good enough for aggro decks. They just either attack over it or it's inconsequential. And we're never attacking tower, so we don't need the 1k body. 3 Golem of Avarice was our trump against the mirror match. So any Ergon, any control decks, we're going to be able to make them discard as many cards as possible. So, you know, it is what it is. And the 1 Golem of Vengeance was the same thing too, so that we wanted another mainboard boss monster to make sure we could do just that, which is just go over the top on the mirror. So, that was the Golem package. The rest of the dark units were as follows. It was 3 Hellish Guardhounds, 2 Gloom Oligarchs. So, Hellish Guardhound, again, a concession to aggro. These would be sided out normally in the mirror, where, you know, we're less inclined to attack and stuff. And Gloom Oligarch was the MVP of the tournament. You would see, if you ever saw our deck in the stream, you would see that we would loop all our threats with Gloom Oligarch. So not only were we protected against Sophia, but we were also invalidating their board, where it's like, there's no amount of creatures that have more than 5,000 power, so we could just sacrifice our whole board for value, get rid of their 1 powerful card, and then for the rest of the game, you know, their units don't matter. So it was MVP of the tournament. It might be the best dark unit just in general. So going forward with the recent Ergon suspension, I'm still looking at dark as being a top contender because of Gloom Oligarch and other cards like that.
Okay.
So, we're going to get to the augments and the spells last. So, we played 3 Delayed Poisons, 2 Strike of the Golems, 1 Philosopher's Stones, 2 Dust Strikes, and 3 Yami. The numbers for the most part are really like, it made sense to the point where it's like we were still trying to beat aggro, so that's why there's 3 Delayed Poisons and 3 Yamis. Yami's just one of the best dark cards as well too, so you should always be playing 3. The Philosopher's Stone was just a fantastic card. We played a little bit less golems than most other decks do, so that did concern us, but we only needed it to get to 4 because a 2-mana Gloom Oligarch was usually good enough to end the game. And the Dust Strikes, more removal, and the Strike of the Golems was just our main spell to get back with Mayu, which we'll get to later. But this was the way we went over the top in the mirror and also kept Gloom Oligarch just devastating the board every turn. So, some of the better cards to play.
Okay.
The Argent cards now, these are, for the most part, these are flex slots. So all these cards were fantastic in their own way. And the numbers could change on these cards, but for the tournament, we just wanted to have one of everything. Ergon gives you the luxury of being sort of a toolbox. So you can play a lot of 1-ofs and see them in the game because you're milling so many cards in the game. So against the control matchups, we wanted Transfiguration Master. Acidmonger was just a concession to, there may be cards that we didn't know in the tournament, maybe an Altar of the Dragon God deck, or the Skytree augment that I'm forgetting the name of, but mostly in the tournament ended up popping just Hidden Labs, which is also something that is good against. Rudy was another go over the top card. It worked very well with the Hellish Guardhounds against aggro and allurements, and it worked very well against the control decks when we were playing Golem of Jealousies and drawing 2 cards, or Avarice and making them discard 2 cards. And the 1 Silver Watchwoman is that if you saw that a lot of our games would go to time. So if we only played 1 game, this was going to be our trump to win the game in time, or just in general, just to help us catch up. And it also serves as a removal spell because we don't mind spending our 4th turn to trade with a 2k if need be. So, because our deck was just so geared towards the late game that those cards don't matter. So, and then we'll start getting to the blue cards now. So, obviously, Mayu. 2 Mizus, and 3 Great Stormfish. So, the Mizu was just another batch of removal, but it also works as one of our combos where it's like we could Silver Watch Woman on 10, attack, bounce it back, and then attack with it again in case we go to time. So it was a very flexible removal spell and just a flexible card in general. The Great Stormfish was it wasn't an MVP, but it was the best blue card for what we were trying to do, which is we were trying to clear the board. We were basically trying to keep the board clean as best as possible, and it worked as a way to sort of like delay boss monsters with Gloom Oligarch, where we would sacrifice, put their unit to the top of the deck, and then we would get this back with Ergon and just keep doing it again until we get a hand that was good enough. And once we get to a certain point in the game, we're drawing 2 cards a turn with Fizzy, so card advantage again doesn't matter really. We could trade 1 for 1 until we're drawing 2 cards there, 1 card every turn. The Juggernaut was another concession to aggro decks, and it also combos with Mayu, which I'll talk at the end. But the Juggernaut, I wouldn't play any less than 2 if you're doing it in combination with Mayu, just because the curve of turn 5 Juggernaut to turn 6 Mayu might be good enough to end the game on itself. But also, it's very hard to deal with. So it's just something where, like, if you feel like you're behind on the board and you drop the Juggernaut, you probably won't be behind anymore if you get to untap with it. So it's a fantastic card. And then Mayu was the reason we played blue, really. We could have gone Ergon Kite, but that would have given us access to Sophia, which is a fantastic card. But for what we were trying to do, which is control the board and just outgrind people, Mayu is the best card to do that. And so basically it's almost self-explanatory, but it was the main reason we would win our games. And in the mirror match, you saw that it was so important that we would actually sacrifice it even when it wasn't threatened, just to make sure it doesn't get removed by Transfiguration Master, which is something that came up in the mirror. So it's the most important card in the deck, and you would likely mill yourself down to 0 cards in deck if May use the last card, just because it's that important. You need to hit the card. So
okay,
that was simple enough. Yeah. And then for the shards, it was pretty simple. We went with the 6 basics. So 6 basic shards, 1 Corona, and then 3 crystal, or 3 cryptic crystal, excuse me. So Corona was just a removal spell, so very rarely did I ever use it. It only came up in the mirror or when I went down to 0 cards in deck, where Fizzy ended up being irrelevant at that point, because if I drew a card I was going to lose the game. So, but it was good to be there in case we needed a removal spell. Cryptic crystal is self-explanatory, and the 6 basic shards just because, so nothing fancy there. And then for the sideboard, it was a lot of singletons, so I probably should explain them just as they go along, because some of them, they don't make sense, like the Hidden Laboratory. So the Hidden Lab was actually to be sided in for the mirror match, or for any grind matchups where they're going to try to remove our threats 1 for 1. So the idea was that we would throw our golems out there after we have the Hidden Lab in play, and if you're not playing against any air deck, they don't have Zephyr Crystal, so likely they're not going to bring in Acidmongers against us and anything like that. So this card's going to stay on the board, and for throughout the duration of the game, maybe draw us like 6, 7 cards over the course of the game. And it's important because a lot of those units would have died anyways, so it's like free card advantage. An Avarice came in, discarded a card, maybe traded or attacked into a unit, you're going to destroy it, and then I sacrifice it to draw a card. And then it's just like, okay, you know, it's just pure value. And if it stood there the entire game, then it was even more so. So my teammates ended up playing 2 in the sideboard after much arguing, but it makes a lot of sense. It's just that, like, if you have a card that draws you infinite cards, then why wouldn't you want to play it, you know?
Yeah.
So this would only be sided in against decks that do not side in Zephyr Crystal, which is what I'll explain next. I sided 1 Zephyr Crystal for that reason. I didn't know if people were going to be on the plan, because it's not intuitive to play Hidden Laboratory not in a Hoenn list. But Zephyr Crystal was mostly there for slower decks that had augments that we had to answer. So in the mirror match, it'd be if they sided into Hidden Lab, the Altar of the Dragon God, as I mentioned, just things like that. So, you know, I didn't get sided in too much because the control mirrors weren't we didn't get to play game too oftenly, so we didn't get to see our sideboards. But I don't regret sideboarding it, and I probably am. If I do play a control list, I'll always sideboard one of them just in case. So for the next one, I'll make it simple. So these would come in as sort of an anti-aggro package. So the third jealousy would be to lower our curve. So we had a lot of like Golem of Vengeances and Transfiguration Masters that don't do really anything in the aggro matchups. So we wanted to make our curve lower. That's why we would normally just trade cards down, where it's like, what's the worst cards in the matchup? Well, these cards could be upgraded. So we would side in an extra Golem of Jealousy, an extra Dust Strike, the Miasma, Debilitating Miasma, and 1 Golem of Indolence. This usually would get sided out for a Silver Watchwoman. It was just a better card altogether. So aggro wasn't really too hard of a matchup game 1, but that's because they had a lot of dead cards. So we would expect them to side into like better cards against us, and so we would respond in kind by upgrading our cards too. So that's as intuitive as it gets. It's just these were just cards that were flexible, and the Golem of Jealousy especially more so because I would bring it in against control too. Because when I knew that my towers weren't really gonna get threatened, then I can play a card that says 2 mana draw a card or something like that. So that was important.
Okay.
An extra Golem of Vengeance. That's again for the control matchups. I just sided it in as a more like, even though our deck gets very heavy on 6 mana cards, so we don't get to play more than 1 spell a turn. Being able to look at their hand and strip a Sophia or something to delay them a turn, things like that. Like those were important when we were fighting for the board and stuff. So. An extra Acidmonger for the same reason. We just didn't want to get caught off guards by augments that would stick to the board and win the game. So it was just important to bring in. Transfig, that was for the control matchup. Same thing, especially the mirror match. If you're ever able to remove Sophia or Mayu, any Ergon deck just probably crumbles upon itself because it just doesn't have the threat density to kill us. Mayu's too much of a card advantage engine, and Sophia's too good at controlling the board. So if you can get rid of those and maybe Rudy, those are the targets that you'd want to hit. And there's other cards, you know, like Bahamut and stuff. Like those guys are all like boss monsters. So it'd be nice to have answers to them, and so that's why we decided the second one. The big boy himself, Crystal Dimension Dragon. That was just my trump card for the mirror match. I knew that regardless of what aggro or what control mirror we played, I knew that the dragon was going to be very good against them. It's not something that you want to win tower back to my hand. And so if it stays on the board, or if it goes to the graveyard, I just pay a mana and get it back. So it's all good, you know? So nothing to really worry about it. And I still think it's very good. I still would sideboard it, even post Ergon. It's just, it'll take a little bit more working on, but it was a good card for me. An extra Watchwoman. Those were for the control mirrors, or any game that we felt may go to time. So we would want to lean out our deck and possibly be able to take towers in case, you know, we lost the game or whatever the case may be. Luckily, it never came up, but being able to attack with quickness was its primary function, is to be able to get into towers to not lose the game in time. And then 2 soul transfers and 2 brainwipe beams. So for the control matchups and for the aggro matchups. So this is I've sided in soul transfers where delayed poisons weren't good. So usually against any air decks with Zephyr crystals, and I sided in brainwipe beams against the decks like Liam that had threats that I want to take, but I didn't necessarily want to kill. Like this is a genuine 2-for-1 where you take a body on the board, so it just trades up so much in mana. And it's very good against those style of decks. And then Soul Transfer is very good against control decks, where if they don't set up Gloom Oligarch, then you just Soul Transfer their big guy, and then you get to trade down your guy. So, yeah. So it was a great tournament. I probably said a lot of what I said today on the interview, the post championship interview. But for the most part, it just made sense. Is that Ergon was one of the best decks going into the tournament. And we tried really hard to beat it. So the confidence came from the fact that we threw everything at Ergon, from Hoenn Solas, Ergon Kites, and you know, like I even played like Dragonholt Variants and stuff just to see what would happen. But it's like we couldn't out aggro Ergon, we couldn't out control Ergon Fizzy. So if you couldn't beat it, then you might as well join it, kind of thing. So yeah, it was a great choice for the tournament, and it showed because we got top 3, which was awesome. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much what I had to say about the tournament and the deck. So anything else, or?
That's pretty good. That's it.
All right, perfect then. So this is Nori with More Mana Gaming, a collaboration, and I guess I'll check you guys out next time.